This is the IELTS Listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1.
You will hear a travel agent talking to a customer about cruise holiday options for him and his wife.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 10.
Good morning. How can I help?
Well, it's our golden wedding anniversary coming up next year, and I know my wife has always wanted to go on a cruise. I'm here to find out what's available.
The answer to that is a lot. First of all, where in the world do you think you'll want to go? There are cruises to the Mediterranean and the Caribbean, but also to the fjords of Norway. Plus, there are river cruises along the Rhine, the Danube, or the Nile.
I see. We both like going to Spain. What about one of these Mediterranean cruises?
Well, O&P's Mediterranean cruise sails from Southampton and over the following 2 days travels through the Straits of Gibraltar before its first stop at Barcelona.
And the classic cruises?
That sails from Rome, with a return flight from a range of UK airports included in the price.
So the 2 cruises are more or less the same?
Not really. Classic Cruises specializes in history, with talks by experts and visits to famous historic sites, like Pompeii and Athens. O&P's is more leisure-orientated.
My wife does like relaxing on a beach.
Well, O&P's 2-week Caribbean cruise visits some of the world's most beautiful beaches. The turquoise waters are sensational. Like classic cruises, they offer a choice of flights from UK airports to Bermuda, where the ship is moored.
That's great, but I worry that it may be a bit too hot. And if the weather's bad, we could get seasick.
Well, you may want to consider a river cruise, or a cruise along the Norwegian fjords. I've been on Nordic's cruise and it's fantastic. If you're unlucky, it can be a little choppy when you cross the North Sea from Felixstowe, but after that, the fjords are as calm as a mill pond. Plus, the views are spectacular, and the food is excellent, serving up a Scandinavian smorgasbord. The Rhine cruise avoids rough seas, obviously, but it's great. Plus, it is the standard of accommodation, with no inner cabins. You can stop at beautiful historic cities, which are great for sightseeing and shopping.
As well as lying on the beach, my wife loves shopping.
In that case, you may want to consider O&P's Mediterranean cruise.
That's great, but what are the prices?
This is where that Mediterranean cruise is real value for money. Have a look at this list. Like O&P's Caribbean cruise, it's also a fortnight long, but its cabins can be less than half the price.
Well, the Caribbean cruise is expensive, but I guess you get what you pay for, it being so far away and all.
True. And you've got to remember that O&P offers you up to £700 credit per cabin to spend while you're on board.
And it's a lot cheaper than the classic cruise trip.
That's true, but the standard of service on classic cruise makes it worth it. Mind you, though the cheapest cabins are £1,139, £40 more than O&P's Mediterranean cruise, their most expensive is £200 cheaper.
The Norwegian cruise also looks good value.
That's true, and you can get their best cabin with a balcony for less than a mid-range cabin on most other cruises.
Cheaper than the Rhine cruise, that's for sure. What's that, 2,500 for their suite? It's a bit steep.
True, but you will be in the lap of luxury.
Well, I think I'll have to think about all of this. Thanks for all your help.
Thank you, and please come back in if you have any other questions.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2.
You will hear an extract from a radio program about what to do if you find a baby bird away from its nest.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 20.
Well, with this being Environmental Awareness Week here on Lanes FM, our regular nature spot with Jim Roper is particularly appropriate. What are we looking at this week, Jim?
Thanks, Graham. At this time of year, as new life hatches out, a lot of listeners have contacted us asking what to do if they find a baby bird. The recent cold snap has added to their concerns. But there's certainly a lot of chirping going on, and some of the newly hatched chicks do leave the nest a little too early. While it's understandable that you want to help a little bird you find, if the chick is injured, your care may result in the little thing relying on your help and not being able to survive on its own in the wild. So if you find an injured chick, it's best to contact a wildlife expert, such as the team at the RSPB. Contact details are available on the show's website. When finding a baby bird, or a hatchling in general, it's important to know if it's a nestling. These are recently hatched chicks that haven't developed feathers, or a fledgling who have. It's best to return a nestling to its nest if it can be found as soon as possible. This wouldn't be a good idea with a fledgling. Water birds, such as a duckling or cygnet, need a different approach to fledglings. In this case, try and find the mother and place the chick nearby, within the mother's earshot. If you can't find the mother, then contact an expert at the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, or similar organisation. So what to do when you find a baby bird? First, see if the bird is healthy or not. For instance, is it able to flutter its wings? If not, it may be ill or injured. Or is it bleeding? In either case, contact a wildlife rehabilitator. If the baby appears healthy, then decide if it's a nestling, a fluffy one, so to speak, or a feathered fledgling. If it's a nestling, look around for the nest. If you can see it, place the bird in the nest. Then, if you can, observe the nest from a distance. If the parents visit the nest, your job is done and you can leave. If you can't see a nest, and if you're able, make a replacement nest using a box or carton lined with leaves or grass and hang it from a nearby tree. If the parents return to tend to the chick, you can leave them in peace. If not, contact a wildlife expert. If you've found a fledgling, the first thing to do is see if it's safe from predators, such as cats. Then place the bird on a nearby branch. Again, observe from a distance. Are the parents close? If so, you can leave. If not, seek expert advice. Now, though the people at the RSPB do a marvellous job, remember it is by its mother that any lost chick are most likely to survive. And that's it. Remember to look at the station website for more information and contact details for local wildlife organisations. And it's back to you, Graham.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 2. Part 3.
You will hear a lecturer talking to 3 students about an engineering assignment they have recently completed.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 30.
Well, hello everybody. As you know, we're here to discuss your latest assignment, which was an assessment of the effectiveness of an everyday household item from an engineering point of view. I hope you've all managed to read each other's writing and can give some comments and suggestions. Now, Suzanne, you chose a kitchen knife. Manish, yours was a ballpoint pen, and William, you looked at a desk lamp.
Yes, I did a desk lamp. I really wanted to look at a microwave oven, but another member of our group had chosen it.
Well, you did a good job with it, and it was certainly very interesting from an engineering point of view.
I agree. It was the best project, I thought.
Thanks, Manish. I particularly admired your report too.
I liked your report too, Manish. There was so much detail.
Thanks, Suzanne.
What did you learn doing your project, Suzanne?
I didn't realise how complicated it was to make the blade and how many times it needed heating and cooling to make it strong.
That's known as tempering the steel.
Yes, I remember that word. Another thing is the price. Knives can be so expensive. I was shocked.
Mine too, Suzanne.
What do you mean, William?
Well, really good lamps can cost a fortune, much more than in the big stores.
My ballpoint pens were really cheap. Mind you, mine are always leaking.
Really, Manish? I don't have that problem.
Good. I'm glad you have all looked at each other's reports and have something positive to say about each. I know you had a good reason for submitting late, Suzanne, and that won't count against you. There were certainly good aspects about each. There was a lot of technical information in your study, William. Manish, you had clearly done a lot of research to get so much detail on the history of pens. And Suzanne, your report had a great deal of information on all the different types of knives that are available on the market. But there are things you need to consider. Unfortunately, William, you will have to redraft some of your assignment. As was mentioned in lessons, the college uses a computer program that compares the similarity between a student's writing and information on the internet. It detected too much information copied word for word from your sources and not paraphrased. I know how much you worked gathering information on kitchen knives, Suzanne, but a lot of your quotes were from commercial, not academic sources. These give a biased view as they are trying to sell their products. And lastly, Manish, again, you put a lot of hard work into your reports, but with your lengthy history of pens, it was too descriptive and you missed the opportunity to evaluate other types of pen and compare them to ballpoints. But on the whole, some good work and you should all be proud of yourselves.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4.
You will hear scientists talking about the effect that oceans have on the world's climate.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
We've heard a lot about how increasing levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide will lead to a warmer world. However, there are some who believe, for Western Europe, the opposite may be true. They suggest that global warming could lead to a weakening of the Gulf Stream and a considerable lowering of temperatures. But first, let's remind ourselves what the Gulf Stream is, how it works, and what its effects are. Named after the Gulf of Mexico, it is a warm water current, largely originating in the warm waters around Florida and the Caribbean, which travels to the northeast and the western shores of Europe. This is the reason locations such as the Isles of Scilly, off the UK coast, have frost-free winters, allowing palms to grow, in sharp contrast to the harsh winters on the same latitudes of the Atlantic's west coast, such as New York and Boston. As the waters of the Gulf Stream and its extension, the North Atlantic Drift, cool, they sink to depth and return south via the Labrador and Norwegian seas. This is known as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, commonly shortened to AMOC. Such circulation is largely driven by the Earth's rotation, so is present in all the world's oceans, including the Pacific, where places on the east coast of the ocean, such as Vancouver, have a comparable climate to those in Western Europe. However, it is believed the AMOC could weaken due to its increasing temperature and decreasing salinity and density, caused by the melting of the Arctic ice cap and the inflow of meltwaters, particularly from permafrost in the Siberian tundra, which could stop the surface flow of warm waters towards the north. There are a number of feedback loops which could intensify this warming. First of all, as the Arctic ice sheets melt, less of the sun's radiation is reflected back into space. Decreasing this cooling effect, and increasing surface temperatures. The thawing of the permafrost of Siberia and Canada will flush even greater amounts of less dense fresh water into the Arctic area via rivers such as the Ob. Furthermore, this melting process will also release large amounts of methane previously trapped in the ice, which is a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, intensifying warming in another positive feedback loop. In fact, it is this massive freshwater input from ice melt, river flow, and increased rainfall that could reduce the salinity of Arctic waters, greatly weakening the AMOC. This process could weaken the entire North Atlantic circulation, either pushing the Gulf Stream and North Atlantic drift further south, reducing temperatures in northwest Europe, or at its most extreme, resulting in the reversal of these flows and bringing freezing waters to these areas. However, others have suggested this is unlikely, as they argue that it is the Earth's rotation that chiefly powers the Gulf Stream and not the AMOC. Moving on, what has been the effect of global warming on the distribution of marine life, particularly plankton? I would say that in the northern reaches of the Atlantic...
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.